Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be in time and space. So let's talk about flight planning. And some of the things that we will cover in this video are using to and from, searching, removing, add and remove waypoints, custom waypoints, navigation aids, picking a runway, visual flight rules, what that is, VOR to VOR, what that means, IFR, low and high, what that means, arrival and departures, SIDS and stars, using Skyvector to find elevations and other things, what your flight plan looks like in the GPS, and the GPS adding and removing waypoints. Other topics that we're going to hit on in this are the instrument landing system, tuning radios, autopilot, choosing a radio source, and again, instrument landing. That's in there twice. It's redundant. Okay. Let's get out to the main screen here. So when you come in, you're presented with a screen similar to this. I have more points on mine. Let me go ahead and just skip down to the third thing here, the nav aids. The reason why I have more points on my screen at the moment are these filters down here at the bottom of your screen. It says open filters. All right. So for this, you can basically turn everything on if you want. But how I got a lot of these extra points is down here at the bottom under navigation. Nav aids. So I would turn them on, and then I would turn on your fix RNAV position report. So other points. That's all it really means. Okay, close that. So that's how you get all the other stuff you're going to need later. Like these wonderful things. ILS for instrument landing system. For the instrument landing system. All right, well, let's get up here to the basics here. So from and to. You know, where are you taking off from and where are you going to? That's pretty straightforward. So it'll start saving your favorite ones that you take off from and land at, and it's got ones that it's recommending for you to check out. So that's kind of cool. All right. We're going to be, let's say, taking off from my local airport, K-Fly, Meadow Lake in Colorado Springs. And let's say we want to go to Centennial Airport in Denver. So we can type in Centennial, but let's just say we were going to search all of Denver. So you can use your search bar up there to type in a city. And you'll get presented with everything it finds with Denver. So nice little search feature. So there it is right there at the top. Centennial in Denver. Okay. So now we have a basic route set up on our main screen. From Meadow Lake to Centennial. But let's look at it closer. Okay. So it has us taken off from runway 33. And then landing over here at Centennial at 35 right. Okay, but look at the angle it's bringing us in at. The instructors will always tell you, try to get a nice straight in on the runway. The further out you can be, the better. So this flight plan right here is making me nervous because it's bringing me in at a side angle. And I really, as a noob, I want to get a straight. So let's add this point. Now these points with 5 letters, these don't exist in the real world. These are just navigation points on the map that your GPS and flight computer can map to. So let's add that point right there. All right, so that shifts our flight plan a little bit, and it gives us a nice straight line. It's passing this point. It's not actually added to it. Okay, so let's say for whatever reason, the wind has shifted down here, and it's better that we plan to take off at runway 15. So now back up here, you can set this as your departure right there by clicking Set as Departure. And that'll change. That will change your takeoff position. You can also do it right here from the runway. So let's go back to 33. And that's how you can pick which runway you want to take off. You can also take off from other places at the airport. You might want to do a cold start and be using your checklists. So you might want to do that. Okay, and let's say 35 right. It doesn't really work for us either. So let's pick a different runway at Centennial. Now we're on 17 right. Come up here and see how that looks. Come on. Imagine if we were doing a long flight. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Okay, so see what that does? That takes us right to that end of the runway. And yeah, that's not great. That's just too sharp of a turn. So let's add a waypoint. Okay, so that makes our flight plan look a little bit different. But let's say we want to come over here first. Okay, just add a waypoint. And you can remove it as easily too. Re-click on it and choose remove. Now, this is hit or miss, and it might work for you and it might not. It works for me sometimes, and that's adding a custom waypoint anywhere on the map. Anywhere. Okay? Now, why this doesn't work sometimes and why I don't have a clue. But sometimes you can just click on the map. Yeah, and it's not working right now. Sometimes you can just click on the map and you will get an option to add a point. And so far it has nothing to do with which selection I choose over here. It just hit or miss sometimes. It will either allow you to add a waypoint or it won't. Let's try low. Yeah. And some days it works perfect. You just click and it'll allow you to add a waypoint. So good luck messing around with creating points like that. It may or may not work for you. Since we're over here, let's talk about that. These options over here. Visual flight rules and instrument flight rules. Well, as a new pilot, you're going to want to probably stick to visual flight rules. And there's the two options are direct GPS. And that will try to set up the most direct route, basically point to point, between you and your destination. But again, doing direct can leave you with strange angles, so you still may need to add, like that. You still may need to add a point in there, like we were just doing. Okay. Now, VOR to VOR is radio station to radio station. Don't let it be any more complex than that in your head. It's radio station to radio station. So if we look at if we select that and then look at our plan, it is going to try to plot. I wish these were smaller and you could move them away, and you probably can. Okay, so after we take off, let's see where this one goes. It's a short route. It may not have a whole lot of VORs to go to. Yeah, there's one. Oh, no, that's just a waypoint. I don't think there's enough VORs between us and where we need to go for it to plot. So let's pick someplace far away like Kansas City. And I don't know any places in Kansas City, so... Or even Kansas. You know. Let's, Green Valley. I picked the wrong place. Let's go over to this menu. A destination. Okay, that's much, much better. These icons on the map that have 3 letters, those are radio stations. They don't play music, but that's just what they are. Some old pilots will tell you you can actually tune to radio stations that play music and hear the music while you're flying. That's not an option in Microsoft Flight Simulator right now, and they want you to stick to the traditional flight radios. Now, these are just positioned around the world for you to navigate to and plot to. So, if we zoom back in from our takeoff point here, it's going to go to this radio station, and then to that radio station, and then that radio station, that one, and then we get to our destination. So once you tune one of these in, radios in, you can use, and you learned in the lessons, in the very first lessons, the lesson 6, 7, and 8, or 7 and 8, about radio navigation and your dials and your steam gauge, and how to follow one of those waypoints of the radio stations. Okay, so now other options in here are instrument flight rules, and they want you to be so good using your instruments you're not looking out of the cockpit. You are literally flying by instruments, and that's ultimately what you want to be able to do when you get to the instrument flight rules. Now, low altitude airways are highways in the sky that other commercial airlines and people use to navigate around. So there are literally highways in the sky, and you can't see those highways at the moment in Microsoft Flight Simulator. You would need another free website like Skyvector. Let me see if I can pull that up for you. Let's go, Skyvector. Where are you? Okay, good. You should be seeing that. Now, Skyvector will allow you to see these blue lines right at the moment are Victor Airways. So those are highways in the sky, and you can tell which each one has its own number. So if I zoom in closer, this is Victor Airway 572, Victor 291, Victor 264, and there are points, those on the map, going back here, these points with 5 letters in them. Reef, Texco, Zivad. Okay, all these ones with 5 letters. Okay, in Skyvector, those are these points on these Victor Airways. They're at the intersection points or points along a Victor Airway. So here's Oates, Hoxel. All right. So those are the points that you're navigating and that I'm picking in here. So as I was modifying our flight plan, I was picking those points that correspond to these points on these Victors. And later you can I don't know how to do it with the GPS right now, but you can enter the Victor Airway. So you can enter a point here like Frizzy, and then in your GPS you can select V572. So once you hit here and enter V572, it will travel you along that pathway. So then you could get to this VOR, fly over it, as we learned in the first couple of lessons, or again lessons 7 and 8, I think. And you could fly over the VOR radio station, turn to a heading of 263 degrees when you're over the top of it, and you could fly Victor 291 without actually even entering it in your GPS. Or let's say we were flying over the VOR here and you turn to a heading of 242 degrees, you'd be flying basically along, this one's got a longer number, Victor 264. All right. And you can enter these points in your GPS. Oats and, these five letter waypoints, and we'll get to that shortly. Get back to Flight Simulator. Okay, another good thing that Skyvector is good for, let's get back over there, is something you can't see in the Microsoft Flight Simulator right at the moment, is elevations. All right, so here in Colorado, we have a lot to worry about. We have mountains everywhere. So, or any place that you're traveling around, you could have hills all over. You need to know your elevations. So these big, bold blue letters, 10.5, 9.8, 7.6, that's elevation. 10,500 feet, 9,800 feet, 7,600 feet. So when you're planning and plotting, you should really use Skyvector so you don't run into a mountain. And there's ways you can plug your elevations into your GPS as well. But for right now, it's just, when you are moving, you definitely need to, unless you're going to be monitoring it the entire way and adjusting the elevation yourself. Either way, it's a good idea to know how, what the elevations are as you're planning a route. I have definitely run into mountains before by not paying attention. And when you're doing instrument flight rules, again, they sometimes won't let you look out the window. They'll put a mask over your face or a blinder kind of thing, so you can only see your instruments. So you have to be that good with your instruments and have planned things out appropriately. What if you get caught in a storm and you have low visibility or no visibility? You have to be comfortable enough using your instruments and having developed a flight plan or have maps with you to know where you're at all times and where the ground is. So it's essential that you start learning some of those things. So Skyvector is a fantastic tool, and there's so much it can do. We talked about just a minute ago about the IFR high and IFR low. This has got the world low maps. So if you want to get rid of the visual flight rule stuff, you can just see all the low airways, and then it's got a world high. And that's another set of highways that you can plot to that are just higher. So you can imagine that the big jets and bigger planes that are moving around at super high altitudes or higher altitudes, they're going to be using this to plot their traveling. Okay, but for us right now, as noobs, we need the world VFR. Now this thing is chock full of fun things you can find. There's so many cool things you can plot to. So visual flight rules is literally that. You have to be able to fly from point to point visually. So it includes roads and rivers, and it includes wind towers and radio towers. There's a radio tower right there. A wilderness area here. So you're going to find all kinds of really neat, interesting things written on these maps. So as you're traveling around, you could follow this river, the Virgin River right here. So you might want to plan a route following that. And then when you get to, like this intersection right here where it forks off, hey. So it's literally that. You're planning a route using visual identification, following highways, landmarks, buildings, radio towers, wind towers, dams, anything that you can use as a visual reference aid as you're traveling to look down and say, oh yeah, that's there, turn here. So that is the nuts and bolts of visual flight planning. Other things that you can learn and that you can see better on here than you can see in Microsoft Flight Simulator at the moment, and that is airspaces, which we're not going to cover in here other than just mentioning them. I'm not going to cover the different classes of airspace or any of that. But you can see that there's certain areas that are blocked off or circled off, and with the exception of these circles for the radio, the VORs, which look like that and have a compass around them. These are all different airspaces. And the blue ones are usually military and restricted, like it says down here. Restricted. Where does it say restricted? There it is. Restricted. So yeah, and there's information on here that, where you should be when flying around when using these maps. But as a new person, you're going to want to avoid a lot of people's airspace and learning to plot flight plans that move in and around airspaces so that, you either don't have to work, if you don't want to work with ATC, so you could plan routes that don't go into anybody's airspace. You can also learn to work with air traffic control and request clearance to move through. But again, that requires that you know how to read these maps and what elevation you can fly at through their spaces. So that's another video and more training that you're going to need is, what are the proper elevations for flying. And when you get around these big cities, it's a mess. So you need to learn how to read these. Yeah, isn't this a cluster? You need to learn how to read all this and know at what elevations you can fly along these Victor Airways or whatever airways, or you don't have to follow one of these Victors. Just if you're going to be flying around, how high can you be out here? How low should you be until you get out to an area like here, where it's nice and clear and you're out of everybody's airspace? It's got to be maddening being out here on these coastal areas, because look at all the overlapping airspaces. How does an average guy figure this out and learn to plot and move? And it's like, oh my Lord, that's going to be busy, busy, busy. So Skyvector is a fantastic tool, and not only that, you can go to Flight Plan, and you can enter in the same kind of information that you would enter in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So let's say to KDen again, back to Denver. Okay, so it'll do the same thing it's doing in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It'll provide you the same kind of thing. So there are ways that you can create flight plans. Now, the neat thing about this one is you can drag points. And you could tell it to pick that intersection, LUFSE. We know that is a waypoint. Any of these waypoints that exist on this map are going to exist in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So LUFSE, it exists in the simulator. So let me plot to that one. Okay, and so you can create these flight plans in this. I actually don't know about this one, but software similar to this on other websites. And you can export the document and you can import it to your Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it will load into your GPS. So there's a lot of things you can do, and we haven't even scratched the surface on that. So, yeah. So now we've got a flight plan, and we want to fly it. So let's go ahead and... Am I missing anything else on this tutorial? Arrivals and departures. Yeah, I didn't do that. If you're now starting to do the instrument flight rules, and you've set up an instrument flight between these 2 points, you're going to get other options up here. Departures and arrivals and approaches. Okay. Now, when you drag some of these down, there's going to be... Oh, gosh. This one's not complying and giving us... it's a small airport. These are both really small airports. Let me pick big airports. The small ones, they don't have any of this stuff, and that was my fault there. So let's pick a big airport like KCOS. And a big airport like KDen again. So you can see the arrivals and departures. All right. So these are different departures. So basically, you need to think about these like exit ramps. So when you're leaving an airport, you're going to use an on-ramp to get onto the highway. Okay? That's all these are. These are on-ramps. And these are routes that are on-ramp routes to a Victor airway or other airway. Okay? So that's how you think about those. Now over here, the arrivals are just off-ramps that lead you down to a runway. So the arrival is the off-ramp. This is the on-ramp, this is the off-ramp, and there is your runway. Okay, so in the real world, the pros have to, as I understand it, have to submit flight plans that operate on these kind of on this kind of information. So they're going to need to submit flight plans that include all this stuff. But where do you find all this stuff? Let's go back to Skyvector. Another reason why it's invaluable. It's my most valuable player. So here is Denver, and if you put your mouse over it and right-click, you'll get the first option here. If you hover over it, you can get an airport diagram, and you can get all the frequencies for the runways, but you see what it says here, instrument approach procedures. Okay, so those are off-ramps down to runways. Now if we scroll down, it says departure procedures. So if we're taking off from Denver and using departure procedures, those are our on-ramps. So these are all assigned, it gets confusing, but these are all assigned based on where you're going. So you can understand if you're going to go north, south, east, or west, or combinations in between, that's what these are all for. These, why there's so many of them, I don't actually know. But you know, it's an international airport, so there's a lot of them. And here's arrivals. So here's the off-ramps. Sorry, I said that wrong. These are the instrument approach procedures are the frequencies and information about the runway, and it says ILS, the instrument landing system, or Localizer for the runway 7, 8, 16, blah, blah, blah. So these are the frequencies and information about getting down to the runway. There's the departures, so on-ramps. There's the arrivals, off-ramps, down to the runway. So let's look at one of these. Let's look at first. Let's look at the ILS for runway 7. Hopefully you're still seeing that. Good, it is. The most valuable information you're going to get out of this is right here in the upper left corner. That is the localizer, the instrument landing system frequency. These can be found in Microsoft Flight Simulator only by clicking on those filters that I mentioned, the nav aids. So you will be able to get these frequencies inside Microsoft Simulator if you have gone down to the filters and turned on nav aids, and these will appear at either end of the runway. If it's the same runway, it's going to be the same frequency for either side. They should just put them in the middle and not be redundant. But when you click on one of these, here now it brings up information over here. And the last thing in this box here is the frequency. Again, it's the same on this side of the runway as it is on this one, and every major runway at major airport, if they have one, it will be different for the other runways. Okay, let's go back to Skyvector. Oh, and okay, so this is an overhead view looking down on the runway, and then this arrow pointing. Now the fat end of the arrow is where you enter from, and the direction you enter towards the runway, and it gives you the heading 262, and it's got other information in here. Here's the localizer again, 11155. It's the same as it is up here. It's pointing it out. It's printed twice. There's a VOR right there, the Mile High VOR, DVV. You'll see the points on here that have 5 letters: Sarah, TAILR. So waypoints. Now, the other most valuable information on this page is the side view down here at the bottom. At what altitude should you be entering? at that point right there. So it says 7,000 feet. So when you're approaching a runway for an instrument landing, right there, to catch the glide slope down to the runway, you're going to intercept it right there at 7,000 feet. A lot of people are like, I can't get my instrument, my autopilot to take me down to the runway. And a lot of it has to do with that right there. If you're off by 100 feet right here as you approach it, it's not going to catch it. You've got to catch it right where and make them connect. Imagine the two computers speaking. If you don't hit that point right there, they're not going to speak very well. Okay, and then also the elevation touchdown point to the runway. Okay, did we cover everything? Arrivals and departures using Skyvector. So now flight planning in the GPS. All right, so here we are, ready to fly at the city of Colorado Springs. And the flight plan that we've entered in out there is now available to us on our GPS. So if we use the range button here and zoom out, the other zoom out, we can now see our flight plan. Remember when I said LUFC exists in the simulator? There's LUFC right there. So this is the flight plan it has it set us up to. So we can manually fly this, or we can use the autopilot once we get into the air to follow that, which is nice and swanky. And you use the autopilot button over here in combination with the navigation button right here. Okay, now that's direct. Let me touch on that. That is direct GPS. Right now, by default, if you take off in the air and turn on your autopilot and hit nav, it will start following that route. If we were doing the VOR to VOR, which we talked about, radio station to radio station, that's a different source. All right, it's not using the GPS waypoints, it's using radio points to those radio towers. And so this is another lesson entirely, but I do want to at least touch on it. To change sources, you have to use the CDI key. Okay, so this will turn to a green arrow. Now this is VOR1, and you've got two VORs channels that you can use. VOR1 and VOR2, you have two nav radios. All right, if you click it a third time, it goes back to GPS. All right, so CDI is the source that your autopilot is using. Okay, so right now we're on GPS, and it'll follow this GPS route. Okay, let's look at our flight plan. If we go to the FPL, flight plan button on our GPS, this is the route that we created out on the main map. All right, our departure is KCOS, and then it's got our on-ramp, as I understand it. This is the waypoints it'll be using. There's LUFC again right there. Then it'll go to, it's going to actually tune to a radio station because that's got 3 letters. We don't have to switch it over. If it's programmed in there, it'll go to it. Again, we'll get to that in a different lesson on how you're planning. And then it has us arriving at Denver, and we don't have any special off-ramps set up for this at the moment. Okay, to get into this and edit it, you need a cursor to place a cursor in this window. It's not one of the GPSs where you can touch screen and type things in. There are other planes in Microsoft Flight Simulator that have more advanced GPS, but this is going to be your first pretty much advanced. There are earlier models too, which do the same thing. But this is the G1000 we're using. So to get a cursor in there to modify one of these or remove one, let's say we don't want to go to Lufsea. All right, you press this button, toggle the selection cursor, and now you see that we have a flashing bar up there. That means we have an active cursor. Now this is two buttons stacked on top of each other, and if we use the big knob at the back, we can translate up and down or side to side. You know, it's going to go over to the next thing we could change. You can go back and forth, left and right, by rotating the knob. And let's say we need to remove Lufsea. So now we have Lufsea highlighted. There's a clear button down here. Clear, cancel, remove. Okay. Let's clear it. Now Lufsea's gone. And if we look at our flight plan over here, yeah, Lufsea was removed. Okay. If, let's say, for whatever reason, now we need to put Lufsea back. Oh, I didn't actually want to remove that. Okay. You, wherever you're at, and if you start entering another one, it's going to put it above wherever you're at. So we need Lufsea to appear above FQF, so we highlight FQF. And now the small knob allows us to start entering. So if I rotate the small knob, another window pops up, and then I rotate the small knob again, I can rotate until I get an L. Then you use the big knob to go over to the right or backwards. So use the big knob to go over one space, then the small knob to add. We look for U. I wish the knobs were closer so I could zoom in a little bit better. Then the big knob to go over a space. Then the little knob to enter, look for F. The big knob to move it over one. The little knob to enter. And it's auto-completing now that I've entered the S. And we just need to hit enter. So now it put Lufsea above FQF right where we want it. And if we look at our flight plan again, now Lufsea is back. So that is how you can add and remove waypoints. We could clear this whole list by using the menu option over here. And we could delete the whole flight plan. And you can enter all this information in manually. It just takes a little bit of time. Rotating these knobs to close it, just click menu again. Pretty much that's how this thing works in general. Anytime you open something, you can close it by clicking it again. Open the flight plan, close it. Now, this thing has got some great features in it, which we're not going to really talk about on this particular one. It requires a whole tutorial just on the GPS, and that's how to use the different pages of your GPS to find all this information, you know, or to pull up and look up and search information. So there is definitely more to it. Like you could just search for airports, you can just search for radios. So there's yeah. So there's a lot to the GPS, and we're just barely scratching the surface, but it's enough to get you going with creating flight plans, editing the flight plans, adding waypoints, removing waypoints. All right. And I said I wanted to talk about the radios really quick. And again, you need a whole tutorial for them, but in a nutshell, up here, these are your navigation radio buttons. And over here are your communication radio buttons. So let's say we were gonna plot to a VOR and not use the GPS. We're gonna just disregard the flight plan at the moment. That's been thrown out the window. All right, and wherever we're at, we need to go to the HGO radio station. So I could go look it up over here. Here's ways you can find it. There it is on the map. So let's say that there's HGO over there. Let me get over to it and see if we can see it better. We have to ditch the whole flight plan and we have to go to HGO. Okay. We can find the frequency in here by using some of the knobs I talked about. And we can plot to it directly using the set direct course to it. And it will provide all the information we need. So like right now, HGO. What I'm trying to get to is that if we're in an older plane that doesn't have GPS and you still need to find that frequency and you have maps, we'll use Skyvector to find that frequency. Because while you're in flight, your VFR right at the moment doesn't allow you to pull up frequencies. They're working on it. Okay, and then enter. Now when you enter, it'll say activate it. Yeah, let's go ahead and activate it. Okay, so now it's created a direct to HGO, and it'll go there. All right, but let's say now, again, we're using an older plane. We don't have a GPS. We can't do that. There's no way to do that. We just need the frequency and to tune to it and try to find it. Okay, so let's go back out to Skyvector. Okay, Skyvector. Close this. On our map, here's HGO. Well, that's Thurman. There's HGO. There's the frequency. 1121. Go back here. So now we need to enter the radio station and then make it active. So here's our nav button, and again, it's two buttons, one on top of the other. The big knob controls the outer numbers, so we need to set that to 112. Then the inner knob, the small knob, changes the smaller numbers. Oh, short-term memory. 1121. 1121. Okay. So we've tuned the radio station, but we didn't make it active. This double-headed arrow is this double-headed arrow. And what it does is it switches it from standby, like it says here, swap standby and active nav frequencies. Okay. Now it's active and it says it. HGO. Okay. But as I pointed out earlier, the source is still on GPS. We need to click this, the CDI button, and now we've got a green arrow, and this green arrow is going to be directing us to the HGO frequency, HGO radio tower, or it's a radio station. It's not even a tower. It's a little round structure on the ground, and because they're little round structures on the ground, they're prone to line of sight in bad weather. So you have to be up high enough in the air. It's found it, it's tuned to it, but we don't have a complete bar green arrow line. The middle of it, of our bar, is missing. So it's somewhere out there and we don't know. We need to get up to a high enough elevation to where we can receive that radio signal. Let's do that now. Let's get up in the air. This is Colorado weather, Colorado altitude, so our mixture's got to be just a little bit leaner up here. Let's get our nose raised for takeoff. Reset our view and get in the air. Okay, so we're up in the air. And I know from the maps that we were just looking at that it is to the east of us. So from this airport, I know 100% that it's to the east. But right now, if we look at our screen, we don't have it yet. We don't have a complete arrow. We don't have any reading on it yet. So right now, you can keep circling above the airport or at a certain elevation, like right now. You see how we've got a green bar now? We've got a full arrow. Oh, my Lord. Okay, we've got a full arrow. Okay? And like I said, we know it's to the east. So we're going to turn to the east to intercept it. And then when we intercept it, we're going to turn to it. And the closer we get to it, the finer the fidelity will be. So touchy. It tells us that it's right now, using this, that it's 48.8 nautical miles. If we're using an older plane, it's hard to determine that. You might need other equipment like the directional equipment that tells you the distance between you and the radio station. If not, it's just a matter of using your gauges and following your needles and getting the information off the map and using your stopwatch, all that stuff that you learned in the lesson. Like, well, what is the stopwatch about? Well, yeah, it's how many miles away is it? How far is it? When should you expect to be at it? So it shouldn't take us too long to intercept that beam. It's not that far away from us. And we really don't have to go much further because that really is a different lesson than on navigation itself and using your radios. This one is just basically on the flight planning, but so you get the idea of how to use your GPS and radio. For example, let's say we've still got it plugged in over here to go direct to HGO, as well as with this. So if we switch back to GPS using the CDI and then engage our autopilot, oh man, I gotta get used to these controls. Then engage our autopilot, like I said, and hit nav mode. It is going to start putting us on that course. What's our altitude? We should definitely keep an eye on our altitude. Yeah, we're up high enough. Altitude hold. It's an autopilot lesson, but there's altitude hold, and it'll hold us at this elevation, this altitude. I haven't tried actually to see if it'll autopilot switching to the VOR. So if I switch it back to VOR, yeah, it's actually working. Okay, so that is that. And let's see. The only other thing I wanted to touch on was, and it's a whole other lesson, is the instrument landing, and that's that frequency that we talked about for the ILS. That's also put into the navigation radio. So when you're doing your approaches and you want it to take you down to the runway automatically, you're going to want to put the frequency up in here, and then you're going to use buttons over here, like you're going to switch from nav to approach. All right. It also might require you, will all come later, but it might require you to be in VOR mode, because you're tracking a localizer into the runway, and then you'll hit the approach button, and that will take you down to the runway. And then you usually just disengage it right above the runway and pull your nose up and do a nice landing. Okay. I hope that I did not make this too confusing. I am hoping to goodness that I did not make this too difficult for you and didn't throw too much at you at once, and hopefully we covered enough points. I'm sure that there is a lot I missed. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to flying, and then there's a lot more, and then there's a lot more, and more on top of that. So trying to be comprehensive can be really, really, really difficult. There's a lot going on here. But for the new person who's really never done this before, I hope this helped you out in some way, and that you now know how to at least create basic flight plans and check your elevations using things like Skyvector and finding frequencies and learning how to pull up airport information for where you're taking off from and where you're going to. Learning a little bit about the departure procedures and the arrival procedures, the SIDS and the stars. Get back over here. How to pull up all the extra little waypoints in here. How to manually edit your GPS. The difference between visual flight rules and instrument flight rules. Low altitude airways, high altitude airways, adding custom waypoints. So if you have any questions, and you probably will, there's just a lot to it. If I can answer them, I will. If not, I will try to at least point you to other videos that can. If not, just look for other videos. There's people have been, as long as flight simulators have been around, people have been making videos. Well, since YouTube has been around, people have been making videos on flight training lessons. And all this stuff is, a lot of this stuff doesn't matter what you're flying. This information translates over. So a GPS sometimes is a GPS is a GPS. It doesn't matter which program somebody's using, software somebody's using. Also, in general, a lot of the flight schools now, the professional flight schools, are making all the information available. Even the FAA puts out training information. So everything that you need to learn, you can learn. You definitely don't need my videos at all. I'm just doing them because I'm learning myself, and one of the ways you can demonstrate that you have learned this stuff is by trying to teach other people. So if I have helped you out and you learned something, please give me a like or a comment to let me know, because, again, I'm trying to learn, and I have been studying and practicing now for several years, but at least the last 2 years, like mad, like an obsession, to where flights training stuff is on all day long, and I really do want to demonstrate to certain people I know it, and in doing so I can create a video on how to do these things, how to use your GPS, how to navigate. I can speak it, I can direct you to the right things. So please help me out by giving me a like or a comment, and that way I can show other people, see, I'm not doing too bad. If you want to correct me on anything, please do. If you want to link to your own training videos that highlight things that I may have missed or other ways to do things, please use my comment section to promote yourself, promote your own links. Don't worry about it. It's all about the knowledge anyway. So, yeah. Thank you so much, and I will. I recommend if you liked the way I'm trying to explain things, and you want to help me out, I've got a whole bunch of other videos. Some of them are redundant because I've made mistakes. I'll be trying to edit out the bad videos, and like this one, I'm trying to recreate it because the other one I messed it up so bad in trying to swap scenes. So I've got quite a big folder going now of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 videos. But again, you can watch whoever you want. Some teachers are way better. So thanks a lot.